Hi everyone, this is صفاء كاظم Mirza, an assistant lecturer from Mustansar University Translation Department. In this lecture, we'll briefly delve into the world of speech sounds and how they function in language. This lecture is going to be divided into two parts. The first part is all about phonetics and phonology. The second part, however, is going to be about the organs of speech. Now let's begin with the first part. Alright, now let's begin with this. So phonetics is the study of speech sounds. It involves understanding how sounds are produced by our vocal apparatus, how they travel through the air, and how they are perceived by our ears. For instance, consider the English word cat. When we pronounce it, we produce three distinct sounds: ka, a, and ta. Pay attention, these are sounds, not letters. Similarly, in Arabic, the word bait is made up of four sounds: ba, a, ya, and ta. Again, now mind you, these are sounds, not letters. Phonetics breaks down these sounds to understand their individual characteristics. Alright, so let's move on to the branches of phonetics. We have three main branches. We have articulatory phonetics, acoustic phonetics, and finally auditory phonetics. We will examine each one of these briefly. Let's start with articulatory phonetics. So this branch looks at how speech sounds are produced by the movement of our speech organs. Think of articulatory phonetics as the chef in a kitchen. The chef is responsible for preparing and cooking the food. Similarly, articulatory phonetics examines how our vocal organs like the tongue, lips, and vocal cords produce different sounds. So consider the sounds pa and ba. Pa as in power and ba as in bathroom or Batman. Both are produced by closing the lips, but the sound pa is voiceless. This means that the vocal cords do not vibrate, while the sound ba is voiced. This means that the vocal cords vibrate. This difference in production is what articulatory phonetics studies. In Arabic, the difference between ha as in har and ha as in hawa is in the place and manner of articulation. So the sound ha is produced in the pharyngeal area with constriction, whereas the sound ha is produced in the glottis. Okay, let's move on to acoustic phonetics. So this branch examines the physical properties of speech sounds as they travel through the air. We can visualize these properties using tools like waveforms and spectrograms. For example, the waveform of the sound da, the English da, of course, will look different from that of the, again, the English the, due to their distinct acoustic properties. Similarly, in Arabic, the waveform of the Arabic da will differ from that of the. And again, of course, I'm talking about the Arabic the. Now, I would like you to think of acoustic phonetics as a sound engineer at a concert. The sound engineer is responsible for capturing and analyzing the sound waves produced by the instruments and vocals. Similarly, acoustic phonetics examines the sound waves or speech sounds, including their frequency, amplitude, and duration. For example, let's have a look at this. When we look at the waveforms and spectrograms of pa and ba, we can see that the sound pa, as in power, has less energy due to the lack of vocal cord vibration, and this is of course compared to the sound ba. Acoustic phonetics uses tools like PROT to visualize and analyze these differences. Okay, so Again, let's talk about acoustic phonetics. It is all about the physical properties of sounds, how they look and behave as waves in the air. This image shows us the waveforms of three different sounds: b, p, and m. Okay, b, p, and we have m. The waveforms you see here are like fingerprints for each sound. They show the sound strength, amplitude over time. The taller the peaks, the louder the sound at that moment. Alright, again, the taller the peaks, the louder the sound at that moment. So this image shows us the shape of three different sounds: b, p, and m. Think of these shapes like a heartbeat monitor. Each peak and valley tells us something about the sound. Okay, the articulatory onset is when your mouth starts making the sound. Imagine getting ready to speak, like preparing to say ba, pa, or ma even. So the auditory onset is when you actually start hearing the sound. There's always a little bit of time between when you start making a sound and when you hear it. And this time is different for each sound. So, for example, the sound b, notice how the sound starts almost immediately after you begin making it. This is because the sound b is a voiced sound, meaning your vocal cords start vibrating right away. The waveform here shows a shorter delay from when the sound starts to when it reaches full strength. So you hear the sound back quickly, about 165 milliseconds after you start making it. This is because the sound b is a voiced sound. Now how about the sound p? Now look at the sound p. There is a longer delay before the sound reaches full strength. A longer delay before the sound reaches full strength. This is because the sound p is voiceless, so there is a gap before the vocal cords vibrate. This delay is clearly visible in the waveform. Clearly visible in the waveform, showing a longer flat line before the sound spikes. And of course, when I say longer, this is in comparison to the sound b. So this one takes longer, around 325 milliseconds. That's because it's a voiceless sound. Your vocal cords don't vibrate right away. Now, how about the sound m? Now, for this sound, for m, the sound also starts immediately because m is voiced. But the waveform is different because the sound is produced through the nose, giving it a unique shape and a slightly longer delay compared to the sound b. Although m is voiced, meaning your vocal cords vibrate immediately, the waveform shows a slightly longer duration due to the nasal quality of the sound. This means that this sound is nasal. The delay is not because it doesn't start right away, because it does start right away, but because of how the sound is shaped and sustained. Alright? So you might say, what's in it for me? Why this matters in acoustic phonetics? So acoustic phonetics helps us understand these differences by analyzing waveforms. The shape of the waveform tells us a lot about how a sound is produced and heard. By comparing these waveforms, we can see why b, p, and m sound different, and how their acoustic properties like timing and voicing set them apart. Alright? Now let's move on to auditory phonetics. This branch focuses on how we perceive sounds. It's about perception, perception. When I say perception, this means that it involves the ear and the brain as well. Okay, so it studies how our ears and brain, how our ears and brain process different sounds, such as distinguishing between s and sh in English. This distinction is crucial in understanding speech perception. In Arabic, differentiating sa, the sound sa as in sama, and the sound sa as in safa, is another example of auditory perception. So I would like you to think of auditory phonetics as a food critic at a restaurant. The food critic evaluates the taste, texture, and overall experience of the food. Similarly, auditory phonetics examines how our ears and brain perceive and differentiate between sounds. So, auditory phonetics studies how our auditory system processes these sounds and why we perceive them as distinct. Okay, so we can say that this image captures the whole thing. We can encapsulate the whole thing here. This image beautifully captures the three branches of phonetics. We have, of course, we begin with articulatory phonetics. This is where it all begins, with the speaker using the vocal organs like the tongue and lips to produce sounds. All right. Okay, now how about this branch, acoustic phonetics? The sound then travels through the air as sound waves, this messy middle part, where we analyze the physical properties of these waves, like their shape and frequency. And finally, we have auditory phonetics. Okay, finally, the sound reaches the listener, who hears and processes the sound with their ears and brain. Together, these branches help us understand the complete journey of speech, from how it's made to how it travels and finally to how it's heard. All right. Now, what is the meaning of phonology? Phonology, on the other hand, is the study of how sounds function within a particular language. It looks at the rules and patterns that govern the sound system of a language. In phonology, we deal with concepts like phonemes, which are the smallest units of sound that can change the meaning of a word. For example, in English, p and b are phonemes because they differentiate words like pat and bat, pit and bit, and so on. When we talk about phonetics, we're focusing basically on how sounds are physically produced by the vocal organs. We have already established that. So we have this example, the difference between pa and ba, or the differences between pa and ba. We can look at this example from two perspectives, phonetics and phonology. All right. Okay, so let's have a rapid review or a quick recap. What's the difference between phonetics and phonology? To understand the difference between these two branches, think of building a house. Phonetics is concerned with the building blocks, the bricks themselves. It studies the physical properties of each brick, such as its shape, size, and material. This is similar to how phonetics analyzes the physical aspects of speech sounds, such as how they are produced and perceived. On the other hand, phonology is like the blueprint of the house. It focuses on the bricks. It focuses on how the bricks are arranged according to specific rules and patterns to create a coherent structure. This is analogous to how phonology studies the abstract mental aspects of sounds and their function within a language sound system. So, For example, in English, the t sound can be produced differently in the words stop and stop. Phonetics examines the physical production of these sounds, while phonology looks at how these variations are understood by speakers and fit into the language sound system. Phonetics would study the physical properties or the physical differences in how these sounds are articulated or produced, while phonology would analyze their roles within the language structure. Okay. So basically this is the main difference, or these are the main differences, but understanding both phonetics and phonology, we gain a comprehensive view of how speech sounds are produced and function within a language, much like understanding both the properties of bricks and the architectural blueprint gives us a complete picture of how a house is constructed. Okay, now let's move on to the next part, the second part of this lecture, which is all about the organs of speech. Now, we will be exploring the organs of speech. These are the parts of your body that work together to produce the sounds we use in language. Alright, let's start by looking at the key organs involved. First of all, we have the lungs. Think of your lungs as the engine of speech. They provide the airflow needed to produce sound. Without air from the lungs, we wouldn't be able to speak at all. Imagine trying to play a wind instrument without blowing air into it. Nothing happens, right? Of course, nothing will happen. The same is true for speech. Air from the lungs is essential. Alright, now how about larynx? The larynx, often called the voice box, houses the vocal folds. Where air from the lungs passes to the vocal folds, they vibrate, creating sound. You can feel this vibration if you place your fingers on your throat and hum. Just like this, or hum. Okay, this sound can be shaped into different speech sounds as it travels through the vocal tract. Now, how about the pharynx? The pharynx is like a resonating chamber. It amplifies and modifies the sound produced by the vocal folds. It's like the body of a guitar that amplifies the sound of the strings. The size and shape of your pharynx can influence the quality of your voice. Now, moving on to the oral cavity. The oral cavity is your mouth. It's where most of the shaping of speech sound happens. By moving your tongue, lips, and jaw, you can produce different sounds, like the difference between cat and cot. Cat and cot. Now, the nasal cavity. Finally, the nasal cavity comes into play when producing nasal sounds like m, n, and ing in English. For these sounds, air flows through the nose instead of the mouth. You can feel this by pinching your nose. By pinching your nose, just like I'm doing right now, while saying the sound will change. Okay, the sound will change or stop. Well, you can't really produce the sound ma while pinching your nose very hard. It's going to be very difficult. The sound will change or stop because the air can't pass through the nose, you know? It cannot pass through your nose. Just try it. You'll find it very difficult to impossible to do it. Now, each of these organs plays a crucial role in producing the wide range of sounds that make up language. Together, they work in harmony to create the sounds and sentences we use to communicate every day. Now, let's dive deeper into the role of the lungs in speech production, focusing on inhalation and exhalation. Now, the lungs are crucial because they supply the air that is necessary for producing sound. Think of them as as a power source for your voice, much like a battery powers a device. On the left side of this image, you see the process of inhalation. When you inhale, your lungs fill with air, expanding like a balloon. This is the moment when you prepare to speak, gathering the air needed to create sounds. Now, on the right side, you see exhalation. This is when you release the air from your lungs, and it's this flow of air that allows you to produce speech. As the air is pushed out, it travels through the vocal cords, which vibrate to create sounds. Now, why inhalation and exhalation matter? For speech, the exhalation phase is the most important because it's during this time that sounds are produced. Think of it like playing a wind instrument. You blow air through it to create music, just as we push air through our vocal cords to create speech. Now, every time you speak, you repeat this cycle of inhalation and exhalation, controlling the flow of air to produce different sounds. For example, when you speak loudly, you might exhale more forcefully, and when you whisper, like I'm doing right now, you use a gentle exhale. Understanding how the lungs work during inhalation and exhalation helps us see why they are so essential for producing speech. Without this steady supply of air, our vocal cords wouldn't have the power they need to create the sounds we use to communicate. Okay, now in this slide we're going to explore the articulators, which are the parts of your mouth and throat that shape the sounds you make. So let's begin with the tongue. Now the tongue is the most versatile tool in your toolbox. It can move in different directions and take on different shapes to produce a wide variety of sounds. For example, when you say t, as in top, your tongue touches the alveolar ridge just behind your upper teeth. Now, let's move on to the alveolar ridge. Let's talk about it a little bit. So this is the small bump you can feel just behind your upper front teeth. It's crucial for sounds like t, d, and n. Think of it like a platform that your tongue uses to create these sounds. Okay, now how about the hard palate? So the hard palate is the hard part, as the name suggests. It is the hard part at the roof of your mouth. Sounds like sh in shoe are made when the tongue is close to the hard palate. It's like a solid surface that helps shape the airflow in your mouth. Now how about the soft palate? So the soft palate is also known as the velum. All right, so it is located behind the hard palate. So behind the hard palate we can find the soft palate, also known as the velum. This part is flexible. Okay, it is movable, flexible, and can move to open or close the nasal passage. For example, when you say k in cat, the back of your tongue touches the soft palate. Okay, now how about the lips? All right, so your lips are crucial for sounds like p, b, and m. They can come together or close off completely to create different sounds. The lips are like the gatekeepers of the mouth, controlling what comes out. Now how about the teeth? Both your upper and lower teeth are essential for sounds like f and v. When you say f, as in fat or fool, you you lightly press your upper teeth against your lower lip. The teeth in this case act like the boundaries that shape how air is released. Okay, now how about the pharynx? The pharynx is a space in your throat that helps to shape sounds by acting as a resonating chamber. When you produce sounds like ha, the pharynx plays a key role in giving the sound its unique quality. Now, let's talk about the larynx. As we mentioned before, the larynx houses the vocal folds, also known as the vocal cords. It's also where the sound produced in your vocal cords begins its journey through the other articulators. So each of these articulators plays a crucial role in speech production. By moving these parts of your mouth in specific ways, you can create the full range of sounds used in speech. So just like a musician uses different instruments to create different notes, your articulators or the organs, your organs of speech work together to create the sounds of language. Okay, so this is another illustration for the articulators. You can have a look at it just to make it clearer for you. And now we have the difference between the windpipe and the fruit pipe. I'm not really going to focus on the fruit pipe. This doesn't really concern us. We're going to focus on the windpipe. Now, the windpipe has a scientific name, which is the trachea, and the same for the fruit pipe. It also has a scientific name for it, which is the esophagus. So again, let's focus on this part because it is related to speech. So the windpipe, also known as the trachea, is a tube that carries air from our noses, from your nose and mouth down to your lungs. Think of it as the main highway for air. Without it, we wouldn't be able to breathe, let alone speak. So when you speak, air travels up from the lungs through the trachea, passes through the vocal cords in the larynx, and then is shaped by the articulators to produce sound. It's like the airflow in a musical instrument, essential for creating sound. So having a look at this illustration is very important to know the difference between the windpipe and the fruit pipe. This will help us to understand, how our body keeps these two essential functions, breathing and eating, separate and efficient. It's a clever design that ensures we can breathe, talk, and eat without getting things mixed up. All right. Okay, now this is the larynx. Now, because the larynx is a central organ where voice is generated, it is commonly called the voice box. Without the larynx, we wouldn't be able to produce the sounds necessary for speech and communication. Okay, so this is a visualization of the vocal folds during speech. So when you speak or sing, these folds or cords come together and vibrate as air from your lungs is pushed through them. Okay, so this vibration is what produces sound. You can imagine them working like the strings of a guitar. When plucked, or in this case vibrated by air, they create sound. So the tightness and position of these cords control the pitch of your voice. Tightening the cords makes them vibrate faster, creating a higher pitch, while loosening them makes them vibrate slower, resulting in a lower pitch. Okay, so this slide shows us the two main positions in the vocal folds during different activities, breathing and speaking or singing. So when you're breathing, your vocal folds are open. This is called abduction. This open position allows air to move freely in and out of your lungs without creating sound. When you speak or sing, your vocal folds come together. This is called adduction and vibrate as air passes through them. These vibrations are what create sound. The faster the vibration, the higher the pitch of your voice. So what's the key difference, you might ask? The key difference here is that during breathing, the vocal folds are open and relaxed, while during speaking or singing, they are closed and actively vibrating to produce sound. So understanding these two states of the vocal folds helps us appreciate how they switch between allowing us to breathe silently and enabling us to create sound when we talk or sing. Okay, so in this slide we're looking at the vocal folds of a normal child. This is how they appear when viewed through a special camera. Alright?
E. Now, A as loud as you can. A. E. Now, A as loud as you can. A.
Okay, so when the child speaks, these vocal folds come together and vibrate rapidly. This vibration is what produces the sound of the child's voice. The speed of the vibration determines the pitch, so since a child's vocal folds are smaller, they vibrate faster, creating a higher pitched voice. So the rapid opening and closing during speech are what create the different tones and pitches in a child's voice. So let's move on to the next slide. We have the vocal folds for a normal female. Alright, so again, we see the vocal folds of a normal adult female.
E. E.
Alright, so when the woman speaks, the vocal folds come together and vibrate to produce sound. Compared to a child's vocal folds, these are slightly longer and thicker, which leads to a lower pitch in the voice. Okay, so the pitch of the voice is determined by how fast the vocal folds vibrate. In adult females, the pitch is generally higher than in males because the vocal folds are shorter and vibrate faster. So this view shows how vocal folds function during speech, controlling the pitch and tone of the voice. Now let's have a look at the very last video in this set, which is related to males. Alright, okay, so in this slide we see the vocal folds of a normal adult male. Speaks, the vocal folds come together and vibrate, creating sound. Alright, so compared to females or to female vocal folds, these are typically longer and thicker, which results in a deeper, lower pitched voice. So the lower pitch in male voices is due to the slower vibration of the vocal folds. Because they are longer and thicker, they vibrate at a lower frequency, producing a deeper tone. This video highlights how the size and thickness of the vocal folds contribute to the distinct pitch and tone of a male voice. Okay, so this slide illustrates the two primary states of the vocal folds, closed and open. When the vocal folds are closed, they come together to produce sound. This is essential for speaking and singing. The closed position allows the vocal folds to vibrate as air passes through, creating sound waves. Okay, now how about when they're open? So this is just like this, but in a different way a little bit. When the vocal folds are open, they are apart, as you see, so allowing air to pass freely in and out of the lungs without creating sound. This is the position of the vocal folds during breathing. Think of it like an open door that lets air flow easily through. So the main difference between these two states is their function. Closed vocal folds are for producing sound, while open vocal folds are for silent breathing. Okay, now I'm going to use the bee analogy just to help you understand how vocal fold vibration works. So let's begin explaining this. Imagine the wings of a bee flapping rapidly, as you can see in front of you, so you don't really need to imagine. Okay, so the faster they flap, the more buzzing sound you hear, and by buzzing I mean it's a sound like this, zzz. Okay, so this is buzzing, zzz. So the same principle applies to your vocal folds. The faster they vibrate, the higher the pitch of your voice. So just like the bee's wings create a buzz by moving quickly, your vocal folds create sound by vibrating rapidly as air passes through them. If they vibrate slowly, the sound is lower in pitch, similar to a bee slowing down its wing movement. So by controlling the tension in your vocal folds, like a bee controlling the speed of its wings, you can change the pitch of your voice. Tightening them makes them vibrate faster, this is a higher pitch, and loosening them makes them vibrate slower, this is a lower pitch. Alright, so just like a bee's wings are essential for flight and buzzing, your vocal folds are essential for producing the sound of your voice. This analogy helps us visualize how the speed of vibration affects the pitch and tone of our voice. Okay, now we have the jaws. Okay, so in this slide we're focusing on the jaw. First of all, it's important to mention that we have two parts, two jaws, the upper jaw and the lower jaw. So I'm sure that you can see, I'm sure that you have noticed that the upper jaw is in fact not really movable, while the lower jaw is a movable part. So the images here show different views of the jawbone, also known as the mandible. Okay, it is the only movable bone of the skull and is essential for chewing and speaking. The movement of the jaw allows us to open and close our mouths, which is necessary for producing different speech sounds. For example, to make the sound a as in apple, we lower our jaw to open our mouth wide. So the position and movement of the jaw in combination with the tongue and lips help shape the sound of our speech. For instance, when pronouncing ma, the jaw is relatively closed, while for o as in open, the jaw drops lower. The jaw works closely with other articulators like the tongue, lips and teeth to produce a wide variety of speech sounds. It's like the base that supports all these other movements. So understanding the role of the jaw in speech highlights its importance in articulation. The flexibility and movement of the jaw allows us to produce a diverse range of sounds that are essential for clear communication. Okay, now before we move on, I would like to circle back to talk for the very last time about the vocal folds, the three positions of the vocal folds. Okay, now let's discuss the three main actions of the vocal cords or the vocal folds and how they contribute to different types of sounds. So first of all, we have this, we have the open position, all right? We have the open position. So when we say we have an open position, you should immediately think of voiceless sounds, all right? So the vocal cords can be drawn apart from each other, allowing air to pass freely through the opening between them without causing any vibration. When sounds are produced in this way, they are called voiceless sounds. An example of this would be the sound sa, as in snake. Okay, now I'm re-explaining this but rephrasing this at the same time, so re-explaining it and rephrasing it with different illustrations because this is very important. Now for the second position, vibrating position, when we think of vibrating, or this position, the vibrating position, you should immediately think of voiced sounds. So the vocal cords can come closer together so that when air passes through, it causes them to vibrate. Any sound produced with this vibration is called a voice sound. An example of a voice sound is z, as in zebra, where you can feel the vibration if you place your fingers on your throat. Okay, now for the very last position, we have the closed position. This is basically this can release or produce the glottal stop. So the vocal cords can be brought together tightly, preventing air from passing through them for a moment. So the air becomes compressed below the vocal folds, and when they suddenly open, the compressed air bursts out with a gentle coughing noise. This sound is called a glottal stop. An example in English is the sound in the middle of the exclamation. So this sound is called a glottal stop. An example in English is the sound in the middle of the exclamation, uh-oh. If we're going to release this sound, it's going to be like this, as in uh-oh, or water, or at the end of the name or the Arabic name Safa or Naqa, or you can think of Sama, etc. Okay, so these three actions, open for voiceless sounds, vibrating for voiced sounds, and closed for a glottal stop, show how versatile the vocal folds are in producing the wide range of sounds we use in speech. Okay, now we're looking at the upper and lower jaw and their roles in speech production. Let's start with the upper jaw. So the upper jaw, also known as the maxilla, is fixed in place and doesn't move. It houses the upper teeth and forms the upper part of the mouth. The upper jaw provides a stable structure against which the lower jaw moves, helping to create different speech sounds. Now, how about the lower jaw? So the lower jaw, also known as the mandible, is a movable part. It can move up and down and side to side, allowing us to open and close our mouths. This movement is crucial for articulation, as it helps to form sounds by adjusting the size of the mouth opening, and the position of the tongue and lips, of course. So the coordination between the upper and lower jaw is essential for producing clear speech. For example, when pronouncing or producing sounds like ba or ma, the lower jaw moves up to bring the lips together, and when producing as an apple, the lower jaw drops to open the mouth wide. So the interaction between the upper and lower jaw is fundamental in shaping the sounds of speech, allowing us to produce a wide range of phonetic variations, that is to say, different sounds. Okay, now let's talk about the role of teeth in speech production. Okay, now the teeth, particularly the upper front teeth, are fixed and do not move during speech. However, they play a critical role in shaping certain sounds. So the upper front teeth are especially important for producing sounds like th, the, as in think, and the as in this. Okay, these sounds are made by placing the lower lip against the upper front teeth, or by placing the tongue against the teeth. For example, when pronouncing the sound fa as in fish, the lower lip touches the upper front teeth, creating the friction needed to produce the sound. Similarly, for th as in think, the tongue touches the upper front teeth to shape the sound. So while the teeth themselves don't really move, their interaction with the lips and tongue is crucial for producing certain speech sounds. So the upper front teeth in particular are key players in making clear, crisp sounds in speech. Okay, now let's talk about the palate. Now in this slide we're exploring the palate, which forms the roof of the mouth and separates the oral cavity from the nasal cavity. When I say the oral cavity, I mean the cavity that you can see inside the mouth, and when I say the nasal cavity, I mean the cavity that we can see inside the nose to some extent. Okay. Let's see if I can find it here. No. Okay, so this is the nasal cavity and this is the oral cavity. Cavity is just like a space that you can find here, and this is the space that you can find in this location. All right. So again, the oral cavity, or the cavity, this cavity specifically, is related to the mouth, and the nasal cavity is related to the nose. Let's move on and talk about, let's get back to talk about the palate itself. All right. So the palate is divided into three key parts: the alveolar ridge, the hard palate, and the soft palate. So the alveolar ridge is an immovable part of the palate. It is the area of the gums just behind the upper front teeth. This ridge is crucial for producing certain speech sounds like t, d, and n, where the tongue makes contact with this area, of course. And then we have the hard palate. So the hard palate is the highest and most rigid part of the roof of the mouth. Located immediately behind the alveolar ridge, it is an immovable bony arc that plays a significant role in speech. Sounds like sh, as in shoe, are produced when the tongue comes close to or touches the hard palate. How about the soft palate? Now the soft palate, also known as the velum, is a movable muscular flap that forms the back part of the palate. Unlike the hard palate, the soft palate can be raised or lowered. Okay, when the soft palate is raised, so this is the soft palate. Alright, now we have already established that the soft palate is a movable muscular flap that forms the back part of the palate. So unlike the hard palate, the soft palate can be raised or lowered because it is movable, alright? So when the soft palate is raised to press against the back wall of the pharynx, it closes off the nasal cavity, as you see. So this allows air to exit only through the mouth. Sounds produced this way are called oral sounds, okay, oral sounds. And when the soft palate is lowered, it closes off the oral cavity to some extent, allowing air to exit through the nose. Sounds produced this way are called nasal sounds, like m, n, and ing, as in sing. So understanding the structure and function of the different parts of the palate helps us to see, helps us see how it contributes to the production of various speech sounds. The interaction between the immovable and movable parts of the palate is essential for clear articulation. Again, so these are the two positions of the soft palate. This side shows that when the soft palate is raised, we have what is known as the oral articulation or oral sounds, and when the soft palate is lowered to some extent, we have what is known as the nasal articulation or nasal sounds. Now let's move on to the parts of the tongue. In this slide we're exploring the parts of the tongue and how each part contributes to speech production. So let's break it down simply. Okay, I would like you to focus on this image. So we have the tip. This is the first part, the very first part of the tongue. The tip of the tongue is the very front part. It's involved in producing sounds like t, d, and s, where the tongue touches or gets close to the front teeth or alveolar ridge. Now how about the blade? The blade is just behind the tip and is used for sounds like sh, as in shoe. It's the part of the tongue that moves close to the hard palate. Now how about the front? The front of the tongue is the middle section, used for making vowel sounds like e, as in see. It often comes close to the hard palate when producing these sounds. Now how about the back? The back of the tongue is used for sounds like k, as in cat, and ga, as in go, where the tongue touches the soft palate. Now finally we have the root. The root is the part of the tongue at the very back, near the throat. It helps in producing sounds like at the glottal stop that we talked about earlier. So this is commonly heard in the middle of the word uh-oh, uh-oh. Alright? So each part of the tongue plays a specific role in speech. By moving different parts of the tongue, we can produce a wide variety of sounds, making the tongue one of the most versatile articulators in speech production. Okay, so this video is in fact an MRI of the tongue in action. So an MRI, which is the magnetic resonance imaging, gives us a detailed look inside the body. Here we can see the tongue's position and movement during speech. This view helps us understand how the tongue moves to create different sounds, showing its flexibility and range as well. Okay, so let's play the video.
Ich schließ es gern in alle Rinden ein.
This is another MRI. This is another video, but this time it is for beatboxing. So this might be even more helpful to see how the tongue can be very versatile, or how the tongue can move taking different positions. This video can show you the flexibility of the tongue.
Box we start inside a real-time MRI. Here we go.
Okay, now that was fun. Okay, now these two videos are important because they focus on the tongue's movement. The tongue's movement is key to producing speech, and through this MRI we can see clearly how it works. We can see the flexibility of the tongue. Okay, now let's move on to the very last slide for this presentation. This is a very important one, in fact. This is the classification of speech organs, the articulators, by mobility. So let's discuss the classification of speech organs or articulators based on their mobility. Okay, articulators are the organs in our vocal tract that contribute to the production of speech sounds. Understanding which of these are movable and which are not is crucial for comprehending how different sounds are articulated. So let's start by looking at the tongue and its parts. The tongue is one of the most crucial and versatile articulators, as we have already mentioned, and it is fully movable. This mobility allows us to produce a wide variety of sounds by altering its position within the mouth. By the way, okay, I've already written this and you can see it. So the am refers to movable, and the an-am refers to not movable. So this means that this organ is not movable. Okay, now let's talk about the alveolar ridge and the hard palate. These parts of the mouth are not really movable. They're not movable, so they are really fixed structures. The soft palate, however, is movable and plays a significant role in regulating airflow through the nasal cavity during speech. And the vocal folds, also known as the vocal cords, are another key movable organ. The ability to move and close allows us to produce voiced and voiceless sounds, which is fundamental in speech production. Now moving on to the lips, they are highly movable and contribute to the articulation of sounds like p, b, and m. In contrast, the teeth are not movable. They act as passive articulators, working in conjunction with the tongue and lips to produce sounds like f and v. The lower jaw is movable and assists in opening and closing the mouth, while the upper jaw is fixed, serving as a foundation for other structures. The trachea and larynx are movable as well. Though their movement is more about expansion and contraction, similar to how our lungs function. This movement is vital for breath control, which is essential in speech. Finally, we have the pharynx, which, while it is technically movable, functions differently than the other articulators. So its movement is primarily about expansion and contraction, similar to the lungs, and plays a role in shaping the vocal trunk for different sounds. So understanding which articulators are movable and which are not helps us appreciate the complexity of speech production. Each part of our vocal apparatus has a specific role, contributing to the rich variety of sounds in human language. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.